Uranium. Likely going to be a big part of this upcoming commodity bull market, so let's dive into what makes uranium and nuclear energy quite so special. Hey, my name is Tucker Kraus, and welcome to my channel. If you're wondering where I've been for like a month and a half now, I did not mean to leave for that long. I was originally only planning to leave for like 2 weeks, but then we ended up having this record-breaking heat wave, and then I had this core side to go and do, and a whole bunch of stuff that was just made it like impossible to go and produce videos. Though, I should be going back to a consistent Tuesday, Thursday upload schedule, at least until school starts back up again. Might drop it off to 1, but now I'm rambling. Today's video is going to be a bit more basic, but I do have a uranium company comparison coming on Thursday. But before I keep on wasting your time, let's quickly hop into the video. So lots of developed countries are starting to want to look to cleaner energy sources and moving away from fossil fuels and coal. And part of this is reducing carbon emissions and lessening the impact on the environment and all that sort of thing. And lots of countries are implementing plans to reduce carbon emissions, and of course nuclear definitely helps with that. I'll get into why in just a second. But places like the United States, Canada, Europe, etc., all doing that. Not to mention China's 5-year plan is building tons and tons of nuclear reactors. Not to mention, overall, the world is expected to continue to increase its electricity consumption substantially, in large part due to developing countries just now getting electricity to their people, and nuclear is a great way to do that. That's just the general thesis for green energy in general, so what about solar or wind or hydro, you ask? Well, first up, nuclear is far safer than all of those for workplace-related deaths and things like that. You might bring up, say, Chernobyl, but that was, of course, largely due to incompetence and mismanagement, largely due to failed communist engineering and things like that. And Fukushima, it was caused by the tsunami, and Fukushima on its own didn't kill anybody. It was the tsunami that did. Of course, they were both tragic events, but that no way paints over all nuclear energy, because there are hundreds and hundreds of nuclear reactors in existence, and those are only 2 events that are commonly pointed to. Nuclear energy also produces far less carbon emissions, like the other green energy sources, than standard fossil fuels and coal, but nuclear is also far less environmentally destructive than things like wind, solar, and hydro. Especially hydro, because dams destroy environments because they take up so much space, and solar and wind as well take up so much space to get a reasonable amount of electricity. And of course there's also all the batteries that come in because they can't run 24/7 because they rely on sunlight and wind, and so of course then those batteries, to manufacture those and creates more emissions, etc., it's this whole big thing. Just in general, nuclear is basically the cleanest way to go, as well as, like I said earlier, safest. Uranium is also far more energy efficient than coal or oil, and a nuclear reactor and power plants are going to take up a lot less space than a solar or wind farm. And so it is far more energy efficient to use nuclear than these other sources, which especially helps in some of these third world countries that are maybe just starting to get electricity in, which is of course projected to be the case. Not to mention, just like I said earlier, because the wind and solar can't run all the time, it also needs all the extra batteries as well, and so that takes up even more space and makes it even less efficient. Alright, so that's a lot of the general nuclear thesis. I'm sure you've heard lots of that before, but I just thought it would be fun to put out a video on that. And of course, you know, if nuclear energy is more and more adopted, because there's a good chance it will, because like I said, it is generally the best of all these green energy types. Of course, uranium stocks, uranium miners, those kind of things are all going to benefit greatly from these. But one last thing I quickly want to look at is just a tiny bit of the technicals, specifically the uranium to gold ratio.
And that all goes without mentioning the supply deficits that uranium is likely to face in the future. I was just going over the pros of nuclear energy and why it's more likely to be used in the future, and this is a chart going to what that necessarily means for uranium. And we can see, of course, even with a very slow demand, only a 2% CAGR, we can see that chances are there's going to be still a substantial deficit in uranium, even as mines start coming back online. And of course, if the deficit worsens, then of course uranium price goes up. That of course benefits the miners. So I just wanted to also quickly touch on that. I'm not sure how I almost forgot that, because that's probably the most important part of all this. So I just want to quickly touch on the uranium to gold ratio. We can see down here, uranium is expensive relative to gold, right? You can see when uranium spot price peaked in 2007 at about $136 per pound. You can see up here, uranium is cheap relative to gold, and an average is 22 to 1. This is an older chart from 2013, and things have only gotten worse for uranium since then, coming all the way up here, right? Because currently, it's at a 55.5 to 1 ratio, which is pretty much at an all-time high. And so, of course, when it gets high, it's going to have to come back down. And so, when you say, look at the average ratio, I think, okay, this actually seems very realistic. $81 uranium. I think the supply and demand fundamentals do justify that at current gold pricing. Though, if you take that all-time high 6 to 1 ratio, I don't think that's likely. $300 per pound uranium, I just don't see happening. But of course, form your own opinions on that. This is just for entertainment purposes and is not financial advice. So, I think the other thing you could say, oh, but what if gold price comes down and that evens the ratio back out? Yes, that's possible, but in the current market environment, with inflation and things like that, I think that is incredibly unlikely. But, of course, again, form your own opinions on that. Now I'm rambling. Let's get to the outro.
Alright, thanks for watching. I'm going to make sure not to disappear so much this time. Smash that like button if you haven't already, and I will see you next time, which isn't going to be a month from now.